The goal is to make incredible products. And when you make really incredible products that people really want, that means we then have the money and the investment to keep doubling down on our purpose, on doing what's right from an environment standpoint. So, to have positive impact, we need to have amazing products that people want to buy.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to Soul and Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. Today on the show, I'm talking with Ben Mann. He's the CEO of Harmless Harvest, a pioneer in U.S. refrigerated premium coconut water and plant-based dairy products. And if you've had Harmless Harvest coconut water, you know, my friend, it is the absolute best coconut water. I drink it all day long. Since joining the company as CEO in 2018, Ben has expanded the brand beyond coconut water and more than doubled its business and also radically streamlined its supply chain. In today's episode, you're going to learn how Ben uses solution-based thinking to help his team run more efficiently. And you'll hear Ben's advice on building up a brand as a multidimensional persona that meets people where they are. And you'll also learn the number one rule when it comes to impact marketing. You got to have a great product. All right, let's dive in, gang, and fast forward our marketing minds. Tell me how you got into marketing and then ultimately in the CEO role. Were you always like, I want to run companies? Did you find yourself sort of falling into it? How did you know this was your path as a career?
That's a great question, and somewhat difficult to answer, but I'll answer it a couple ways, and I'll talk about a few inflection points where I think we all have these inflection points where you have this realization at some point, sometimes really consciously, sometimes it's almost subconsciously for a period until you like later on when you look back and reflect, you kind of see it. So, first of all, I'm a first generation college student. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, quite poor. And so I didn't know I wanted to go to college. I didn't know I could be a CEO. I didn't know any of these types of things. But my first job, like first paying job outside of mowing lawns and babysitting, was at a private golf and country club. And I started as a busboy there. And that is where I realized that education, I could go to college and do so many different things. I didn't necessarily have to work in a factory like my dad or as a checkout clerk at the grocery store like my mom. So, that was a strong realization for me. And so I applied to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and that's where I went to school. So, kind of nowadays, like how you get into college versus what happened then was certainly wildly different. And I'm not sure I would have made it at that point, but that's where I went to school. I spent, did my undergrad in business. I decided that's what I wanted to focus on. I did consulting coming out of undergrad and more management consulting, but I focused on sales and marketing strategy consulting. And so that's where I really started to realize that I really enjoyed more the revenue side, certainly the marketing side of the business. As far as food and beverage, I've always loved food and beverage. My mom had a small little catering business for a little while. She never made any money at it because she never wanted to charge enough money. Quick
question. When your mom had the catering business, did you ever help her on the business side, or were you more watching and said, all right, well, I feel like I could run this, or I have pointers for her, but did you get involved?
I definitely got involved both in prep, delivery, and then serving. So oftentimes there were some events where, they had people serving. And so I would serve at these private events in people's homes. And so I definitely had a point of view. And I remember, talking to her because I saw the invoicing and I'm like, okay, it's Christmas Eve and you're making stuff and delivering stuff and you're charging literally $18 for a cheesecake. Like, this is like, your cost is 14. Like, I'm like, oh, but they're really nice. I'm like, that's great. But this is your livelihood. You know what I mean? Like, you have to pay the bills. And so she's never been really good at that. So ultimately, she ended up folding the business because, she would never charge enough.
Okay. So you were telling me your history and your origin story. When you were working at, what was your role when you were at, say, General Mills?
I started as an associate brand manager and then, moved up from there.
How did you make the transition into CEO?
My second consulting job was at Interbrand. I did corporate brand strategy consulting. I worked with a lot of C-level executives on how to launch companies, position them, all of that type of stuff. And I remember it was during my time there when I spent, quite a bit of time either with CEOs or C-level executives. And in those meetings and discussions, I realized it's not rocket science. I mean, they're wonderfully brilliant people, very accomplished, but I started to realize, like, wow, I mean, I too could do that. Maybe not yet. I do need to get more experience, whatnot, but it is in the cards if it's something I wanted to do. And so that was the realization there was that, listen, I can be CEO. And I grew up, like my parents sometimes would say, well, that's only for rich kids or that's only for whatever. And I guess you know, and for a short while that would kind of define, or I would kind of like think of it that way. But then I started realizing that anybody can do anything, and that is definitely something that has served me well.
Everybody at whatever role they're in, of course, they're accomplished and maybe they have more experience, but you also realize a lot of the work is intuition and gut, right? And all the spreadsheets in the world, all the training in the world only prepares you so much. At some point, you have to have kind of natural business acumen, I think.
What I would say from a leadership standpoint, I think one of the things that sets apart, I think, most effective leaders from those that maybe are not is you really you have to spend time thinking about like how things kind of fit together, like how, like reading the tea leaves across a lot of different things. And to your point, like trusting and really trusting your, we call it your gut, but it's the knowledge and the wisdom and all the things that you've gathered over the years. It's the ability to see little different points of data and trends and things like that, and being able to figure out like, well, how does it apply and what does it mean right here? Yes, there's actual data, like there's like the hard and fast quantitative stuff that is certainly helpful, but it serves as feeding that overall how you're painting the picture and how you see the landscape, and being able to make decisions in that, both as you talk about soul and like the more quantitative side of it.
For a CEO, people are going to look to you for the vision of where the company's going. How are we going to grow this company? Like that, the CEO has to really be comfortable establishing a vision. And then your executive team around you, your leadership team has to be really, really strong. And if you have those 2 things, the rest you can handle.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, I'll build on that a bit. Part of my role is, and I talked to my leadership team about this as well. It's part of their role as well, but ultimately it's definitely part of mine. It's just, there is this anticipation, like it's not only setting the vision and where we're trying to go, but it's also understanding and thinking ahead for the organization. The further down in the organization you go, the more they're in the here and now and kind of just in their kind of area. And the further up you go in the organization, I expect people to be thinking more broadly. So as a leadership team, it's, don't make it, the recommendation or decision that's most convenient or easiest for you. It's like, what is right for the business? And so, if you're thinking supply chain versus innovation versus marketing, like, sometimes there's some tensions there. Like, if supply chain had their way, we'd produce 3 items and that's it. And whatever. And if you had sales had their way, it'd be slightly different. But how, what is right for the business? How do you find that delicate balance really kind of keeps us in an effective and an efficient position from a supply chain, but also, addresses the nuances of the marketplace, both from a consumer and a customer standpoint. So it's being able to do that. But then for me also, like, I need to anticipate, I need to understand where things are going, where are there dark clouds on the horizon that maybe others are not seeing because they're busy executing this year or building the plan for next year. So, for example, like 2024 in my head is pretty much done. Like, I've got a few, minor things that we're kind of finishing up. My team is all over 2024. And there are some people who are just trying to make sure we finish 2023 strong. But my head is already in 2025, 2026. I'm constantly thinking about, what does that future look like? Because it takes a while. I mean, there's a runway to make sure that we're set up for success in 2025. And that is one of the things that I really pride myself on. And what we are able to do as a team is very consistent, sustained, strong, results. And that requires you have to make decisions for not only the here and now, but for the long term.
Do you have like a team of 3 others that you kind of make some really important decisions with, or do you go into the room, lock the door, and then you come out with the answer?
We live in a very complicated world, and competition is intense. So you want as many brilliant, bright minds as possible. So I have a strong philosophy as an organization is that we all get paid to think. I have blind spots just like every single individual does. And when you surround yourself with people with complementary skills who bring different perspectives and see it differently, and you allow and you create a situation, an ecosystem where it's very safe to share that, and people are actively thinking about the business or where we're going and whatnot, you have the chance of making pretty good decisions and being successful as an organization. And that to me is paramount.
Ben, what do you think you're really, really good at that maybe other people aren't as good at? What do you think makes Ben Ben?
I would say the first and foremost is this belief that we can do it, right? One of our values is making the impossible possible. And that is really just how I approach everything. I am an optimist. I know that. And I surround myself with people who maybe are less optimistic or more realistic than I am. And I do think for an organization that is challenging the current paradigm, that is challenging big established brands, that is, has that more challenger mindset, you need that push and pull, and you need to be able to execute it. But you need that kind of that belief that we can do it, that we can make the impossible possible. So I very much, I'd say that's probably one of my secret skills.
Do you ever get sick of always having the problems come to you?
Um,
You ever get problem fatigue?
no, I don't get sick of that, but I do tell because it's important that the organization learns that muscle as well. So part of what I try to do is like we have to be at a place where you take me out of the equation and the company remains really successful, both from a mission and purpose standpoint, as well as like how we run the business and everything. So I often, I often will say like, bring me solutions, not problems. I want to know how everybody needs to practice thinking about like, oh, here's a situation. Here's, what the challenge we're facing. What are the different ways we can solve this? And then what's their reco? I want to hear what their recommendation and the rationale behind that. Now, I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and we might probe, and we may do something slightly differently, or we might just do exactly what they're recommending. But that's part of the learning process, right? So yeah, I like people to bring solutions, not problems.
What do you think makes Harmless Harvest different from the deluge of other brands out there in the space?
Harmless is in our name. So you have no excuse but to do your absolute best. And I would argue, we're certainly not harmless, and nor is any business or company or individual. But it is a great North Star. It is something that guides us. And so, what I'd say is from a mission standpoint, we're extremely hands-on. It is, top down into the organization. And it's not just like we write a check. Like there are many companies that are just like, 2% for the planet or whatever it may be. And that's great. And it's good. You should be supporting. But writing a check is very transactional. Whereas, we have 28 agronomists on staff that are working with farmers on not only just organic, but we're actually transitioning farms to regenerative organic. So really teaching the principles, doing classes and whatnot. In addition, then we have a separate team that's just compliance, right? Making sure that they're adhering to the principles of organic. And when they're not, or when there are, transgressions, they get disqualified from the system. And then we have to work with them to get back in down the road once they're fit to be part of our organic farms. So it is to me, what sets us apart is it's very hands-on. It's very personal to each person individually. Last year, we took the entire company to Thailand and worked in the farms. I got to learn more about the farming, the bees, the composting, the cover crops, the intercrops, all the things that we're doing, so people could really see it and understand it firsthand. I would say that's foundationally one of the things that I think is very different for us. And then, I'm cheap in so many regards, but when it comes to food and beverage, like what we eat and drink and stuff like that, I am very much a foodie, and I love it when people are just eating and exploring and whatnot. So We make, because the goal is to make incredible products. And when you make really incredible products that people really want, that means we then have the money and the investment to keep doubling down on our purpose, on doing what's right from an environment standpoint. So, to have positive impact, we need to have amazing products that people want to buy. And so I think that's, the second part is just the quality. And I don't think I've worked for a brand where people are more passionate about our product in any kind of food or beverage.
A lot of companies will find the best product you can make for the least amount of money, become a juggernaut, and then decide, all right, we're going to do something good for the world versus, starting from that ethos. Do you find that it's harder?
We spend as a nation, as a population, so little on food and beverage compared to most countries around the world, most industrialized countries around the world, and it costs money to do quality products. Having real cheese versus fake cheese in a product, those types of things are it costs a lot of money, and so I think if you look at the industrialized food, they've gotten very good at efficiency, but so they do have the advantage of it's profitable, they're big. When they make a small change, it has a big impact. So, I applaud. The big companies are making making progress and making commitments. I think they're finding it's a lot harder than they thought. The flip side is, for us, purpose is not especially for a brand like Harmless, is not a matter of convenience. I can't just decide when we're going to be purpose driven and when it's convenient to make decisions that reinforce our mission. It is in the everyday of our business. But what it does mean is we have to be aggressive on simplifying the business and trying to make sure that we support that. And there are times where it's listen, we're going to have to cut marketing dollars. We're going to spend less on marketing because this is the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, our basic covenant with consumers is not only a great product, but to live into the principles of Harmless and Harmless Harvest. And, it is a journey, and it may mean, in some short term, we have far fewer marketing dollars to spend. But at the end of the day, we're building something, and people need to trust that you're making the right decisions. That is, a basic covenant that, you have with consumers that buy your product.
So how do you make sustainability sexy so that it attracts? It's not just internally, people feel like they're working for a company that does the right thing. How do you talk to the consumer with that idea?
So I will tell you, in general, historically, and I do believe it's starting to change, but historically, if you do activations and talk about your mission and, the farms or whatever it may be, it just doesn't, it's not as compelling from a consumer standpoint. The engagement levels, the click-throughs, the purchases, all those types of things are dwarfed by things that are more lifestyle and other. And so, that is just the reality. At the end of the day, you have to run a business. You have to be funny. You can't say you're funny, right? You have to do it. And while we were doing good stuff, I felt that there was more we could be doing. And we really, by investing, making the decision early on to start transitioning regenerative organic, to move very early before anybody else did on 100% RPET, by, doubling down on these types of things, I felt that was important to start generating some wins. And when you have something compelling to talk about, then start sharing.
How do you balance? Do you think about it as like a holistic message, or do you think about, in this channel, we're going to talk about the taste, and in this channel, we're going to talk about the less harm, more good? Or do you kind of think about it all wrapped together as one message?
Yeah, I don't think of it as one message. I think brands are like people, right? As a person.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So how we engage here is different than, let's say, when I'm hanging out with my buddies watching football, is different than when I'm, with my family at dinner, is different than, maybe how I show up at work. All being authentic to who I am, but there are different dimensions of who I am. And so in the same way, it's not, it may be not appropriate for me to be at a cocktail party and then just trying to sell everybody on Harmless Harvest and all that. I mean, I can't help myself. I do always bring samples, and I'm always I'm always in sell mode. However, there's a certain amount, but you have to fit. You have to understand the environment you're in and recognize what is the appropriate message in that environment. And that's the same for brands as you're thinking about brand. And if you're in social media and it's evening, whatever, like people, it's more mindless, being entertained and whatnot. It's not always about this super serious message at that point, but there is a time and a place, like a certain, if somebody's going to the New York Times or whatever it may be, that's where you can have the more serious message. Meet people where they're at
Yeah.
and make sure
Yep.
that you're engaging them in a way that they want to be engaged.
What is the future of the brand? What gets you super pumped about where you're going?
When I worked in a big company, it was about how do I make each of these products that are reaching 35% of households in any given year, how do I make them incrementally better while still holding sales and profit, right? Targets, right? So how do I take artificial flavors out? How do I take artificial colors out? How do I get more whole grains in there? How do I take out MSG? Like whatever it may be to make those products better, but now you're reaching so many people. Now it's like, I have a small, in the grand scheme of things, business that is responsible from a people and a planet standpoint, and we make really good products that are nutritious. They're good for you. They're not full of like junk that you see in other products. How do you bring scale to that? So that to me is like what's exciting about where we're at right now is how do you take these businesses that are responsible, that are making really good products, and how do you take them from a couple points of household penetration to 10 to 20? How do you make it the Cheerios or whatever it may be of these natural organic products and responsible businesses? So that's to me that's part of where we're at and what I want to do. Specifically to Harmless, I feel like we have so much, I can't wait till we're climate positive. That is, a big drive for us. I want to be one of the first substantially, bigger businesses that's climate positive. I want to be more than 75% regenerative organic in the next couple of years. I want to really drive impact and change from an overall business. I don't think we're just about coconut. Right now we are, but we've been doing some work thinking about like what is the next, beyond coconut and all the success that we're going to drive in coconut. What is the next, area of Harmless? What is a crop or a community that is we feel particularly disadvantaged that needs kind of the principles and the approach that we take to farming and working with communities on labor and whatnot.
What is the best part of your job? What's the worst part of your job?
Uh, Best part of my job is definitely I love working with people. I think we have the most talented team that I've ever worked with. No offense to all the other teams I've worked with, like that, they're also have been great and whatnot. But we've assembled a really, really strong team. So working with the people and the kind of family we've built, I think is really exciting. The challenging part or the most difficult part of my job is, we are single sourcing everything out of Thailand when it comes to coconuts. And it is a challenging business model. We are farming. We're working with farmers, and we're going through another drought right now. Most CPG businesses don't have the swings that we have. That to me is difficult and frustrating because I want to invest a lot more and yeah. So, but climate change and those types of things, they're real. It's impacting us.
Do you get hardcore into like the data and the numbers in making decisions, or do you do a lot of gut level decision making?
So I am a pretty analytical, quantitative person. My undergrad is finance and accounting, so I do get into the data and all that type of stuff. But to me, those are not decisions. That's just more information and kind of understanding of what's going on. I think in big companies, people do market research, and that ends up like the research would suggest that consumers think this new product is compelling, and that is the decision. Then they launch it, right? But that is only one piece of information. So to me, the like more quantitative, stuff that you can do and find, they're typically blunt tools, and they're good. They have some good information, but I tend to, I think effective decision making is when you're able to step back and take it all in. And I I intercept consumers in stores all the time. I'm constantly talking to people. I stay very engaged. I'm extremely engaged on the business and just understanding what's going on and then what's going on in the marketplace. And when you take that all in, plus the data you have and the trends you're seeing and all that, that allows you to make good decisions. So I'm more of a soul kind of trusting the wisdom and seeing the marketplace, seeing all of that, identifying the kind of connecting the dots across things with supporting data or whatever that I may, I see and whatnot. And I'm able to make a decision. And sometimes the data would suggest, you always get differing data inputs and whatnot, but it's trying to contextualize how is that gathered? What does that really mean? What is, really understanding how that data came about. Because oftentimes they'll say we shouldn't do this. And it's okay, but what did we ask them and what context and who was it? And, what did they see? And, you really have to understand all that context and all that really do matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mekanism's on the roster. We're working with you and we're really excited about that. For your partners beyond your team, what do you look for in a partner that you work with in, any aspect of the business?
Well, I'd say any aspect of the business is certainly, buying into and believing and kind of living kind of the same philosophy that we have from a business standpoint, I think is first and foremost important. And I think candor and working closely, we should be able to receive feedback and candor just as we deliver candor. As we, when we are able to do that, we're able to run more effectively. And that starts from a place of trust, right? When you trust somebody and you're giving candid feedback, that's, the person is doing it out of just because this is what they feel, not because they don't like you or anything like that. So I would say that is first and foremost. In any partnership, if one is benefiting far more than the other, then it's not really a partnership. So I do believe that it has to be win-win. So that's, really how we have to operate.
Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you think about as sort of a North Star for you?
One thing when I went to college, I got a job at a gourmet Italian restaurant and I was a waiter there. And Peppino was the owner and chef. And he used to say, you have to give in order to get. And that really stuck with me in the sense that, and what he was saying is as you're waiting tables and you're running a restaurant, there are times, you need to be generous. You need to kind of create that goodwill and whatnot. And people will stick with you. Right. And it was a very personal thing. Right. For me, business is personal. And I when it comes to negotiations, I was termed when I was in grad school, everybody takes a negotiations class. I was a velvet glove, right? That was, I'm not a, hardcore, take it or leave it, kind of that's not my style. I am more about how do I make the pie bigger? And then, I'm going to be pretty effective at carving for me and for others. But, I'm always trying to find that win-win.
If you had to describe Ben's business style in one word, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say engaged.
Engaged. Okay. All right. Here's another one. Last question. How would you describe Harmless Harvest in one word?
Responsible.
Perfect. Perfect ending. This was awesome. You're the best. You got me fired up. Soul and Science is a Mekanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.